everybody rowing in the same direction, if you will, to meet those performance indicators. And I'm going to say this a couple times. If somebody comes into a program and says that they would like to improve their reading so that they can read to their grandchildren more efficiently, and they have a high school diploma, and they've been working or not working and have a job, don't have a job, they're not quite a match for our programming. And one of the hard things for us to do as adult educators is to say, you know, you're not a match for our program because we have these performance indicators. Funding dictates that we focus on these indicators and we build our programs to meet these indicators, and in doing that we serve our students well. Melissa, a lot of questions that come in. This is
remember to mute yourselves when people are on.
Now, before I go on, I'm going to talk about data, and if you talk to anybody in Pennsylvania that knows me, they would say that my middle name is Data R Me. It's really not. My middle name really should be Data, because I am administrator and I am, in my current role, data-driven. Qualitative and quantitative data. Annual data, practitioner wisdom data is part of the data package. So data is very important to us. We in May dealt with data system, and after listening to that, listen to their presentation, I would say they're a data-driven state as well. Pennsylvania is a data-driven state. So we don't use the same system that Maryland and Delaware uses. We use something called eData, little e, capital data, data system that we've developed. It's online, similar to yours. It's an online data repository. All 59 programs that are funded in Pennsylvania all put their data in there. So our state can look at aggregated data. They can look at disaggregated data. They can go right down to a student level in a program. Likewise, agencies can look at their data aggregated and then look at their data disaggregated by teacher, by class, by level, by zip code, by whatever, however you want to look at the data. So I'm going to keep talking about data throughout this, but I wanted to mention it now because you're going to hear my context for that as I go on. That's grant administration leg. We have our federal funding through WIOA. In Pennsylvania, we have state funding through Act 143. We also, in those areas, we have fiscal oversight of that grant, and we also have performance indicators, outcomes, expectations in those grants. I'm going to go on to program administration. So once you have your grant set up, now you get to your program. And program administration, when I was an executive director and I was in chief cook and bottle washer at Community Learning Center, this was everybody's business. Yes, I was the overseer, but day-to-day I was not involved in instruction. Day-to-day I was not involved in case management. So I came on my team to come together and talk about program improvement, talk about what we're doing, what's working, what's not working. And we had a saying in our program that flexible is too rigid, you have to be fluid. If you're not willing to change and shift as data is telling you maybe a little shift here, maybe a shift there, maybe ditch this altogether, it's not a good idea, let's try something new, then you're going to be right where you always are. So we're always looking monthly, sometimes weekly at what we were doing and where we were going. Back to program administration. In my mind, there's two parts of program administration, instruction and case management. And we always considered this. I'm going to see if I can do this. As well. That the teachers here, the case managers here, form the base of the triangle. And guess who sits at the top? The teachers and the case managers serve the learner. Form the base and the foundation and structure to support the learner. So the learner can achieve their goals. When learners achieve their goals, then goals. So everything is set up to it's the students' outcomes. The students are going to bring us the outcomes. It might not be in 6 months. It might be in 1 year. It might be 2 years. Okay? We know our learners, some take a long time to reach their outcomes. Programs, they take step by step by step. One HSE test, next high school equivalency, next HSE test, the next one, and the next one. Sometimes learners can do it in parallel. So this is our model. Instruction teachers, case management, we call them career coaches at Community Learning Center. They have various names across the state of Pennsylvania. Case management sometimes has a negative connotation for some of our learners, so we turned it into a career coach. And then that's a fit to our model of when people come in, and we'll talk about student administration, setting their goals. What are your career goals? Where are you going? What's your timeline, short and long term? So I'll get into that in a little bit. So let's talk about instruction a bit. Instruction, that's the teacher role, right? The teacher role is instruction. Pennsylvania was one of 12 states selected to be part of the 3-year pilot rollout of college and career readiness standards, selected by OCTAE down at the federal government, and we did a 3-year process in rolling out standards-based education to our adult ed agencies. Year 1 was unpacking the standards, and what that means is just what are they? And in mind, I wish the standards word was replaced with skills, because these are college and career readiness skills. If you're of the language arts standards at all, and Anchor 1 is confidence in text. That's a skill. Yes, somebody in some place said, let's use the word standard, but I think it freaks everybody out, and everybody loses sight that these are skills. These are skills that people need to be successful. Some group got together, and remember the CRS is a subset of the Common Core standards, so they pulled out a set which they renamed College and Career Readiness Standards. So in my mind, I wish it said College and Career Readiness Skills. So one, we unpacked the skills. We learned what they were, what they meant. We looked at resources that we were using, we looked at lessons that we were using, and we revised them. It was called lesson revision and resource alignment, and we revised them and look at them with the eyes of skills, the standards that our learners were to be competent in, the skills that our learners were expected to be competent in. So we looked at those, and we found out that many resources we were using were really not very good, not very aligned, so we had to do a lot of supplement. Teachers looked at their lessons and said, maybe I didn't focus on the skill enough practice on the skill. There was some peer observation that year 2 process, which was really, really good. That teachers came out of their classrooms and observed their teachers, not in an evaluative role, but what were the teacher doing? What were the learners doing? Were the learners achieving competency? Were they moving along? And then teachers really began to help each other. So model in our state of professional learning communities, and that fit right into this. So our teachers work together, and they figured out those that are separated in 5 counties in Pennsylvania across 300 miles, how they can get together, videotape, Skype. There's all kinds of creative things that we've done. So that was year 2. Year 1, we learned what the standards were. Year 2, we looked at resources and lessons. And year 3, which we're just finishing up now, was called Student Work Protocol. And what this means is we looked at culminating assignments that we're giving. So year 1, let's look at it this way. Year 1, we learned the skills. We learned the standards. Year 2, we did teacher facing. You know, what the teacher's doing, teacher lessons, teacher resources. Year 3, we're now student facing. We're looking at student work. It's such an interesting process because in the process, you look at student work and you try to figure out what they needed to know in order to do this work and what skills was the teacher focusing on. Was the focus too broad? Was the focus too narrow? And the agencies, by and large, and why we did year 1, year 2 to get to year 3. Because we couldn't do student work unless we really knew what the skills were. We couldn't do student work unless we had some idea of what lessons look like. So our instruction now is CCRS-based. An expectation, it's vision of our state PDE that every adult ed student in the state of Pennsylvania has access to a standards-based lesson, aligned lesson. Okay? Instruction, also learner-centered. We constantly are moving away from teacher-centered. You know, the sage on the stage, the teacher lecturing, moving really toward learner-centered instruction, which is a shift for many people. And if you're like me, all of my education, maybe the exception of my doctorate work, was all teacher-centered. And that was through the 70s and 60s, 70s, and 80s, or probably 60s and 70s. And it was really teacher-centered. So it's a shift to turn it over to the learners, to give learners the responsibilities, to give learners the self-directedness. We're continually working on that, learner-centered instruction. And then also the last is results-oriented instruction. Expectations that learners will learn. Expectations that learners will make EL gains. Expectations that learners will write paragraphs more effectively, more efficiently. We again, you look at the outcomes, call them results, call them outcomes, but there's an expectation that that's the purpose of instruction, to see learning happen. It sounds so simple and like, well, duh, isn't that what instruction's for? Well, how do you know it? If that's the purpose of instruction, how do you know that results are happening? It's really important for the teacher to know that so they can make adjustments through informal assessments, but it's extremely important, and I think even more important, that the learners know that they're learning. I'm working with, let me just back up the train, recommendations of our Pennsylvania Department of Ed for staff working on leadership projects, which is me, that we spend 2% of our time face-to-face with learners, that we ourselves are teaching. I think it was one of the best recommendations that was ever made because it keeps me grounded in learning. It keeps me grounded in adult ed. Not high in the sky and get so far removed what's happening in the classroom. And one of the things I realized, a learner that I am working with didn't realize she was learning. And she didn't realize she was learning. Said to myself, I think I need to build that. I think I need to move over more to learner-centered. I need to give this to her. I need her to understand and to demonstrate that she's gaining competency, and we're working on math, in math skills. So it's important not just for teachers to be results oriented, but also for the learner to their learning, metacognition, knowing how you know, learn, that sort of thing. So those are my 3 points of instruction. There's a whole lot more we can talk about, but from my context that I described, these are the 3 things that kind of float to the top for me. Now let's talk about case management, the other leg of the pyramid. And case management, career coaching, whatever you name, you get this position, work 2 things: addressing barriers and transition support. About addressing barriers, okay? We all know what the barriers are, the common ones: transportation, child care, unstable housing. So addressing those barriers. Barriers to what? I say to my staff, I did. Like, barriers to what? Oh, that's right, barriers to coming to class. That's what we're talking about. Addressing barriers to prevent you from coming to class. Because if you come to class, you're really not learning unless you're real self-directed and you have a computer and you're doing this on your own. In Philadelphia, in my experience, that if adult learners could do this by themselves, they would. They do. But they come to our programs because they need help. They need support. They can't figure it out. They can't figure out how to do Pythagorean theorem. They can't figure out how to do simultaneous equations. They can't figure out how to add unlike fractions with unlike denominators. They can't figure it out on their own. They need support. Okay, so we have to. So class, we have to address the barriers. The better you address barriers, and the more efficiently you do it up front, see if they're a fit for your program. The more successful your program, the more successful your programs will be. Some students have so many barriers that they can come to class once every other week. Well, what are we doing? What are we doing for them? It's like Groundhog Day all the time. They come back in, the movie went on while they were gone. We kept going. So now they come in 2 weeks later, and we've moved in the class. We've moved instruction, and they have this huge gap. So what typically happens, they sit, they might make it to break, and then they don't come back. So we learned all these things through looking at our data, knowing our learners. So address barriers, be honest, be open up front. What are the expectations of the program? 2 times a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever it is. Because it's in that class where it's going to happen, where you're going to start to get results, you're going to start to learn, you're going to start to move forward in this sometimes very long process. It's ongoing, but addressing the barriers is really big up front. The more effectively you do it prior to enrollment in classes, and the more effectively you do it before, in Pennsylvania, that 12-hour mark, and talk to people, the more successful everyone will be in the long run. The second thing for case manager is transition support. So transition to what? Transition to employment, transition to post-secondary ed if they have their HSE, or when they gain it, or they have it and you're doing some sort of upskilling bridge program type of thing, or transition to workforce training. Again, it could be with or without a HSE. There's not any workforce training programs in Philadelphia where you don't need high school equivalency. So start working on transition support. So case managers then work on transition. And the follow-up, when somebody does get a job, just periodic check-ins. How are you doing? How are you addressing this, addressing things. Now, overarching all this, at Community Learning Center, and I'm not sure if, I really can't say comfortably if all the programs, Learning Center, we modeled our classes after workforce. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if you're not going to be there, you call in. Because we practice good employment successful employment behaviors, it's likely that our students will be successful when they go to work. So do teamwork, we build teamwork in. We build in our classes. We build teamwork in. We build projects in. We learn together. We talk to each other, and we build those things in. Be on time. If you're going to be late, let the teacher know. All those behaviors in. It really supports successful transition support. So we found that early on. I think in my first year back in 2008. I said, let's model it after workforce, and we went to managed enrollment process, class structure, and we got good outcomes. Any questions about program administration? Anything about instruction, management? We'll start in the
box yet, so.
Okay, well, I'll take a minute and before we go on to student administration.
We have people on the line, so I'm a little reluctant to unmute everybody.
Well, can they raise their hand if they have a question?
There's no hand-raising capability, so the chat box is probably our best bet.
Okay. So if a question, just type in, I have a question, and maybe you could unmute yourself. We could do it one by one.
Sure.
A lot of information, and it's my experience, so if you have any questions, please ask.
All right.
My goal is that you get some new things to think about, some new things to incorporate, work on your practice.
All right, in the chat box from Liz Dennis, and it's what consequences do you have for students who don't follow the workforce protocol?
Really good question. That's a really good question.
Liz, so if you want to.
We certainly do the same kind of thing. We ask them to follow those protocols and call in and be on time. And we struggle with what do we do when they don't do that. I mean, we have things to do. I'm just interested in new ideas.
Yep. Okay, I'm writing some notes down. Okay. First, it's like, how does this connect? But I'm just going to say the first thing. The first thing we do, where I at Community Center, and many of the programs in Pennsylvania have moved toward managed enrollment model. We have many models for our class structure, but many programs have moved to managed enrollment. Enrollment is another way to do classes. I think it, in my opinion, has a very isolated use, a very narrow use, very successful use, but kind of a narrow use. So, enrollment. At the end of every semester, cycle, whatever term programs use, we work with the students and we give them a progress report. During the progress report, it's the same triangle. The teacher, the case manager is there, and these progress meetings take at the end maybe 10 minutes. They're not long counseling sessions. They're 10 minutes. And what's on that progress report is how I'm going to, part of my answer to your question is, how many hours, available hours of learning, class time was available? And how many hours did you come? And what percentage of time is that? Class structure set up to meet, we're at TABE. In Pennsylvania, most programs are TABE and CASAS. Assessments, standard assessments. Our managed enrollment meets the TABE minimum requirement, sometimes 60 hours, 70 hours. Okay, so at the end of each cycle, it fits in post-testing as well. So we don't have to run after people to get post-test because everybody's at different hours. Okay, we're at the cycle here, at the end of the cycle. So in progress note, we have numbers, how many hours you came to class, and what percent of time was that. Also note how many times you were late. Classes, let's say our classes are 9 to 12. 9 o'clock, instruction starts. starts at 9:30, people know, well, I don't have to be there till 9:30. So it starts at 9 o'clock. Okay? And that instruction can be whatever it is. It can be getting your project groups. We're going to review probably questions from yesterday, whatever it is. But instruction starts right there. Okay? So how many times were you late? How do we know how many times people were late? We have sign-in sheets. We have to have paper and pencil sign-in sheets. Minnesota moved away from that when I was at the last COE meeting, and I was like, whoa, holy cow. Because we have paper sign-in sheets. So if somebody signs in at 9:10, then you know they were late. Okay? Now, why does that matter? Because it answers your question. If you're late 100% of the time, let's talk about that. What's your goal? Oh, that's right. Your goal is employment. How's it going to work? And why are you late? Are you dropping your kids off at school? And the quickest I can get here is 10 minutes late. Okay? Are you late because we need to talk about elapsed time and bus schedules and how maybe you got to leave, catch the earlier bus. So get to the root of it. We get to root cause. I came out of business, so if you're familiar with lean, we go to root cause analysis. It's because this is not generally successful behavior. It's not going to be in the workplace. You can't get there 15, 20 minutes late every day. You're going to get fired. Your fellow employees are going to get mad because they're due first. It just doesn't work. It's just not successful. So that's how we address it. Okay? Nitpick it. You're late, you're late, you're late, you're late. We address it then. And we ask them to think critically about how this behavior supports their ultimate goal. Okay? Now,
just one question. You want to take it, or did you want to?
Well, and then just one more thing. So that's how we address it, and personal wisdom, and teachers know who's fooling and who's not fooling. They know. Okay? They know who's playing us and who's not playing us. And the people that are playing us, after one or two cycles, and their EFL gain, there's this continual late pattern, we might say, you know what, because we have waiting lists in Philly. I don't know about Baltimore, but I'm in City, but we have wait lists in Philadelphia. You know what? We're going to, sit out a cycle, and then we're going to give someone an opportunity. Talked about all these things. You heard about them in orientation. You agreed to them, and now we're going to have you sit out. Because if you don't do anything, that's the message. They're not going to do anything anyway. So if you're late. Second thing is to address that. So that has been very effective. Second thing is all adult ed programs in Pennsylvania have to have attendance policies. So we have to write down what we're going to do when people are chronically late or percentage of time. So we have to have attendance policy. So agencies have to figure this out and to think about this. And Community Learning Center figured it out by assessing it through progress notes, giving it to the learner, and having the learner make decisions and the impact of what they're doing now and in the future. So that's how we addressed it. Long answer to a very short question. Next question.
A question from Carrie. Kim, I just unmuted you. Do you want to articulate the question?
I'm having a little bit of problem with audio, so would you mind?
Oh, no. Okay. Kim at Prince George's has a question. What type of software system do you use for case management, and what type of things do you do to track?
Yeah, question. We tried all kinds of things, and that area across Pennsylvania has tried all kinds of things to track that, because our guidelines say we have to track it. Okay, so how we get a data system and set up sort of counting system of how many times we refer people to shelters, to food banks, to this, to that, for barrier support. And then we can also track how many times we've had conversations with people for transition support. So that's a counting thing, just counting. I talked to, Becky Wagner 4 times about transition, just counting. Now, what we all have, because we have 2 sites, and well, actually 3, we're at the Career Link downtown, so we have all these sites. We use Google Docs, because we're a Google-based system. So Google Docs. And there's, everybody has access to them, only the people that need access to them. And last time I knew, first name and the class they were in, first name, last initial, if there were 2 people with the first name, same first name, to try to limit exposure of information. We know what to put in there and what not to put in there, and what's important about our work to support learners and what's really not so important to put in there. So things I mentioned that we do put in there is, the press notes, those are part of the progress meetings, those are part of the file. When we review goal with learners, learner has goal sheets, that's in their file. And when the case managers meet, they talk about the goals, so there's goal review. And so in that Google sheet, it would say, I met with Becky W. in the HSE science class on this date, and we reviewed goals. Okay, that's all that needs to be in there. We just need to track that we reviewed the goals. If somebody needs to know what we exactly reviewed, go to the paper file, which is locked in a file cabinet. So it's a workaround. It's not a streamline. We tried a system called Apricot, online database. I'm not sure if that still exists. It became very cumbersome for us. Case management and the tracking requirements, know that anybody that I've worked with and the agencies I work with we have more and less efficient systems. Because you want counts of when you meet to address barriers, to account for that funding, the fiscal, we have to spend 10% of our money on addressing barriers. It's for us, it's Project Code 2100. So you have to show the 10% of what people did, and the transition support is unlimited. So that's not quite as the addressing the barriers. Does that make sense?
You're good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oops.
Good.
Yep.
Did you freeze? Go on the top corner.
Yeah, maybe to turn that off. No, I don't. Yeah, can't slide. Let me stop sharing my screen for a moment. And I'm sharing. There we go. Yeah, I just stopped sharing and then came back in. Okay, now let's talk about students administration. And again, 3 areas that across the state, and when I was the program administrator, that we focus on are intake and orientation, and that, in my mind, is number 1. It is number 1. Second are goal setting, long-term, short-term, SMART goals. They're specific, they're measurable, we know you're achieving them, because it's really important to show the achievement of these goals over time. And third is expectations, and there's the expectation. Okay, so let's go back and address intake and orientation. We have in Pennsylvania that all students attend orientation prior to class, and we can count 5 hours of their enrollment time toward orientation. One I did when I was at Community Learning Center was change the wording here, and it just be me. Probably. But when I think of in orientation, I think that I'm already in. That I'm already have all the information I need, and this is what I'm going to do. I think that wasn't true. After year 1, year 2, that students did not have enough information to make decisions, real decisions about art for the years DLC had to offer, what Warren County Community College had to offer, what A had to offer. I'm naming programs in Pennsylvania. They didn't know. They don't know what they don't know. They don't, unless they've been in the program before. They don't know what they don't know. So we changed it to application. I'm just going to change the word to application. We have an application process where you come and you complete an intake. Okay? You hear about our program, what the expectations are on attendance for learning, everything that's required, behavior agreements, no gun classes is one thing they have to sign. So we changed it to application. And we said very explicitly that it's a two-way process. This is a decision process, and it's your decision process. Something to do, or your next door neighbor's doing it, or Aunt Sally said to do it. Not ready, because not coming from inside of you yet. Now, if there's enough external motivation that exists as support, that can be transformational for the person once they're in it, and it comes to own the whole process. That's why learner-centered works. Okay? So we changed the word to application, which essentially is intake and orientation. And at the end of that application process, you say, make a decision. Is this for you? Is this the right time? Do you have childcare set up? Do you have transportation set up? You know, how are you going to get here? All of those things. Do you have stable housing? Because that 99% of the people that come to us want jobs. Okay, they're couch surfing and they want a job. Well, couch surfing isn't stability. And if you're going to come to us to learn once every 2 weeks or every week or every Friday, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work because of the nature of our program. And we explained the movie analogy that I gave you, and people nod their head. They understand. You know, when you haven't seen Aunt Sally for a while and then you see her 3 months later, things change. You know, stuff happened in those 3 months. So we explain all that. So one of the best things we did, and it's sort of a movement across Pennsylvania, is to call it an application process. This is who we are. You're applying for a seat. Now, you're going to say, do you take everyone? Yeah, 99% of the people we take. Because what happens is the people that we take that aren't ready, in the first 12 hours, that's where they experiment. And in those first 12 hours, you know whether they are stable enough to come to class every day, and whether they have childcare lined up for more than just the 2-day application session. Do they have it lined up for more than 2 weeks? So in Pennsylvania, I'm really glad we have that. It's actually 11.9 hours for students to experiment, for us to talk to the learners and say, are you ready for this? And work on those barriers. So it's not so much that we screen people out, because it's more people will screen themselves out, and we can work with them once we bring them into class for those 12 hours, and we can repeat expectations. So that intake and orientation. And what's in that process? It's the beginning of goal setting. It's an explanation of the programs. It's explanation of class structures, where classes are, what the expectations for our learning. Is it more self-directed? Is it multi-level? What's it going to be like? And describe that to learners. When we have graduates come in of our program to talk about what the program's like. You talk about attendance policies. Here's the expectation. You talk about the progress reports. So you give them a lot of information, not overwhelming amount. We do it in active activities. They're the best orientation sessions when they're interactive, people asking questions, working in groups, that sort of thing. And the stronger that is, the more successful everyone is, the student, the program, and your state. Goals. Be really important for our learners, setting goals, short-term and long-term. If I that the only goal on somebody's goals when I was in position to do this kind of work, and the only goal that I saw was my high school equivalency, and I'm reading at reading math at a beginning basic. I sort of bit my tongue and walked out and up and down the street 10 times. I would go to the case managers and say, build this out. We need to build it out. The term goal would be, let's start to make some learning gains. Let's work on this. Let's work on gains. Let's work on, clearing out time to do homework, because 12 hours a week of instruction is, you ought to be doing 12 hours a week outside, reading, doing work, practicing stuff you already know. I mean, there's a lot of work that's involved in this. If you just come to class and that's all you do, that's great, but it's going to take you a whole lot more time. And we use a lot of analogies for that. If you're practicing your craft, you're not very good at your craft, right? Malcolm Knowles in Outliers is like 10,000 hours, right? There's a tipping point, not outliers, sorry, tipping point. There's a tipping point, so you have to keep working on this, and we talk about that. That's the core of our programs. Short-term goals, and then you can address them in the progress meetings. So if the short-term goals are for the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks out, they can address them, you can celebrate them, people feel good about them, even if it's a scaled score gain. Sometimes an EFL, if you're at the bottom, you guys know, if you're at the bottom, you just entered an EFL and have, it's really essentially 2.5 grades to get to the to top out of that. You're not in one semester or 2 semester cycles, whatever, be able to achieve that. So scaled score is really important. We don't share grade equivalents. To me, that informs instruction. They don't need to know that. That is more informed instruction. But we work with scaled score and EFL gains. Short-term, long-term. And long-term can be HSC, and then you want to go to our community college into their dental hygienist program, or I want to go to community college to their farm tech program. So then we start to, build their path, building upon the short-term successes to the long-term successes. Expectations I already talked about. Attendance is an expectation. Calling in. Learning is an expectation. We expect you to learn. And that's, it seems kind of, that's what we're here for, but explicitly say it. We expect you to learn. We expect you to come to class and learn. We believe that you can. We can. So we say that out loud, and programs now are really starting to talk about metacognition and helping learners know that they're learning through informal assessments. And if you have a learner-centered program, the learner is taking charge of all this. They know they're learning. They celebrate that themselves. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And then we expect them to ask questions and participate. Okay? So we expect you to get yourself involved, to engage. That's how learning happens. So let's stop here for a moment and see if you have any questions about student administration.
So one of the colleagues, Helen Coop in the room, has a question. Helen, do you want to shout it out? I was wondering at what point in the process the assessment occurs. Yeah. Two types of this. When I'm not on my soapbox with data, on my soapbox with assessment. So we have our formal assessments, standard assessments. The CASAS, the BEST, the GAIN, the TABE. Okay, so those are our formalized assessments, and that's hours of learning,
hours. CASAS, I think, is 100 hours long. You know, I'm more familiar with CABE, 50, 60 hours. Okay, so long learning time. Okay, so if a teacher waits somebody's learning for a semester, they shortchange themselves and they shortchange the learner. So we have formal assessment, which occurs over long periods of time.
Hey, Rebecca?
Yeah.
When do you do the initial assessment?
Yeah, intake.
At the
Test.
Yeah. Yeah. Is the assessment and then goal setting?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
So the test is done during the intake and language arts. And on the side of the house, speaking, listening, if that's what programs do, or reading. Yeah. But I wanted to say, so we have formal assessment, they have informal assessment. And in my mind, teachers that have a whole bunch of tools in their informal assessment tool bag that they carry with them all the time, the more successful they are and their learners are. So your eyeballs are always thinking about, is learner learning? Is this learner learning? Is this learner learning? What do I need to do? How can I adjust? What can I do? So, yeah, the pre-test, formalized pre-test occurs during the intake. The post-test, if you're managed enrollment, happens at the end of that cycle. Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Okay. And let me mention at this time that I don't know what the stats are in Baltimore, but Philadelphia has residency of over 1 million people, and it's estimated that half of those people in Philly have basic or below basic skills. So we have a huge need in Philadelphia, a huge need. And by setting up strong programs, rigorous programs, that's what I mean by strong, high expectations for students, set up expectations for students, and that they set up expectations, learn to set up expectations for themselves, everybody, we can chip away at that, and everybody becomes successful. Okay,
That's pretty similar.
Yeah, it's a problem in Philadelphia. It's a workforce problem. It's a workforce problem. So we tackle it with rigorous programming. We tackle it by knowing what skills. If you don't require an HSC, what skills do employers require? Most of them say, we can teach them these skills. We need you to teach them the soft skills. So that's why we model our classes after workforce. When I hear that, that's what I do to help meet employer expectations.
Fantastic.
If I turn that off, then I can.
You get stuck again?
Yeah. I have to stop sharing. I have to go back to sharing. Oop. Share my. What? I can't.
No, now you stop sharing. So back to share. There we go.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, and the last leg of leadership and what everybody works on together is continuous program improvement, CPI. And there are a lot of bullets here, and I'll just go through them. Things, ideas, things, systems that support continuous program improvement. Data systems and data management. Is the closer you can get to real time on your data, the more impact it have when you're looking at program improvement. If you're looking at data that's 6 months old, a lot of things could have changed in 6 months. So that's what I'll say about data systems and management. And the other thing is, it's not everybody's favorite thing to do. It's tedious. It has to be accurate. You got to pay attention to it. You can't be mind numb when you're doing it, because you start to make mistakes. And I'm speaking from personal experience. When I start to drift off, that's when I start to make mistakes. I select battery instead of survey for TABE, and then I'd just cause everybody rework. So data systems and data management, extremely important to inform continuous program improvement. Once you have good data and you trust your data, then you can do data analysis and evaluation. What are we seeing? Let me give you some examples from across the state in Pennsylvania and also in Philadelphia. Say you have a class that enrollment is starting to wane off. Like, it doesn't seem like people are coming in the doors here. And so you do a zip code analysis of where people are, where they're coming from. And it turns out that where you have your class is 4 bus rides for people. And these people, if you put a class over here in their zip code, we have the 4 bus ride, the 4 transfers, 2 transfers, which leads to lateness. Maybe if we move it there. Now, some people would say, well, they might have to do 4 bus rides to get to work. Well, that might be true, and probably in Philadelphia it is. But what started is to put the class a little closer to home, to get them to be successful. So by looking at your data, your enrollment data, and where needs are, by your data, you can move classes around to where they need to be. Another thing that we did, and programs are moving toward this. If you see level, lower high at HSC, and serious student is within your sights. The horizon, it's with your sights. If you come in and that are away. Now, it could be you're 50 and you're a diamond in the rough, you didn't test well. Well, that'll come out soon, okay? But let's assume that, you know, we tested accurately and teachers aren't seeing any discrepancies between what in class and what the testing was, and we don't have to move them to different classes. We used to call all those pre-HSC classes, we used to call them pre-GED classes. Okay. Well, when I was the administrator, when people asked me what keeps you up at night, that's up at night. What kept me up at night was, how am I really serving pre-GED learners? Those are the learners that drop out because they can't see it on the horizon. What they need jobs. They need jobs now. So, you know, I worried about this, and I talked to my team about this, and I said, what if everything, you know, was, if you didn't come in at HSE level, the goal was to get you to the HSE level. That's the goal. Working toward that and building those skills help you for work. And I went to my workforce system and I said, can you call all your jobs for me that do not require an HSE? You do that? Yeah, we do. Send me that spreadsheet every month. So those pre-ED classes then became workforce prep. We call them career launch now. Career launch, name them what you want. But now we're really working on workforce skills and safety manuals and things that apply, contextualized to workforce. And then we beef up their resume and we have them work on jobs. And then we have a flexible class schedule so that when you get a job, we'll work job around it. If you know, I mean, I don't know, any of you probably, like me, worked in high school, worked when you were in college. I worked during the day, went to grad school at night. So that's the way a lot of people do it. So we teach our learners that. That's a way to reach your goal, is to do this. And we found out, we did analysis of our data, people that were employed, that knew our classes, employed, had learning gains. Because they budget their time and they don't come, they focus. They don't, they're just a different breed of learner. So we went to that model, and it was very successful for everybody. We got employment outcomes, we got people coming back at gains, and so it became, again, and the goal was to move to HSE and to help find a job and get to the HSE, so you can, really get a career pathway started for yourself. When you're in CPI, be honest about identifying your gaps and your strengths. When your program needs to improve, you improve your strengths, and that's easy to do. What's much harder to do is to identify the gaps and change the gaps. Okay, do something about where the gaps are. Data to do that. Again, quantitative, qualitative, anecdotal, which is qualitative, professional wisdom, qualitative, and use your data to identify your gaps and build your programs so that your learners will be successful. One of the most informative way to find out your gaps is to ask your learners. We focus groups, we have performance improvement teams in every program across the state of Pennsylvania. Actually, it's a grant guideline, and many programs include students in improvement meetings. They meet quarterly. So the students can have a voice into what's working, what's not working, what's hard for them, what seems to be a barrier that the agency themselves created a barrier, which is not really what you want to do. In a bad way. They all understand being there on time, and they don't like people coming in late because it's disruptive. So they get that. Any other barriers that could be created by the program unknowingly, unwittingly. So identify your gaps and strengths and do something about it. What do we do about it? One of the things we do about it is professional development. In my mind, professional development exists to support continuous program improvement. We develop professionally so that our programs improve. So in Pennsylvania, it's a grant guideline that we have to set goals for program improvement. We identify a program improvement goal, supporting objectives for that, match learning activities, professional development, which aligns to the objective. We collect data to evaluate the change in staff practice, and then we identify how the change in practice will impact student outcomes. This is Thomas Guskey's work. This is not original to Pennsylvania, but we are grounded in this model. So when we offer professional learning opportunities to support program improvement, there's learning that goes on. Structure supports doing something different in your practice, because if you learn something, you don't change your practice. What was the point? Okay, so how do we know you're changing your practice? What are you doing differently in your practice? What are you seeing in your learners? And we understand, and this is the work that I do right here, we understand that sometimes change is like writing with your opposite hand. It's awkward, feels clunky. So in Pennsylvania, we offer coaches to come in, not evaluative, but to support you as you're changing your practice, as you're integrating tech. Sometimes you need a second pair of hands, so we have coaches that we can deploy across the state in math, in ESL, English Second Language, in ELS, incorporate tech. So we have this cadre of coaches that can go out to help people implement the change. And then how change impacts student outcomes. Okay, that's our CPI in Pennsylvania. And then we have professional learning communities in every agency across the state, and we're building them across the state now. So teachers from the east part of the state can talk to teachers in the west. So teachers in Philly can talk to teachers in Pittsburgh, another big city. In Pennsylvania, not quite alike, but similar enough. Small rural programs can talk to each other. So we're getting intra-agency PLCs and external PLCs getting started. And then again, implementing new knowledge and skills. Try it. Try something new. Take it back. Try something new. One of the big initiatives in PA is incorporating math practices, the standards of mathematical practice. We're building communities to help teachers incorporate those math practices, something that's new for everybody across the state. And collect data and measure the impact. Sometimes sometimes it backfires. It's not such a good change. Let's try to change it this way. Sometimes it's so successful. Sometimes the student notice, oh, we like that you do it this way. So we hear all kinds of things when we ask people, what's the impact of changing your practice as a result of a professional learning opportunity towards continuous program improvement. Any questions? Any CPI?
I don't have any in the box. I want to make a note that I might have to leave.
Well, that's the last slide. That's it. Yep, here it is. So what I've done, just as a recap today, we talked about grant administration, we talked about program administration, student administration, and continuous and program improvement. To me, these are the four key components, the four legs of a leadership chair. And what somebody told me, a wise man told me things way back early in my career, I'm only going to tell you one of them, and that's rather than doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, do something different, expect something different. Try new things, collect data around the new things you try, know your benchmark, try something new, and see what impact it has.
Becky, I want to thank you again for agreeing to do this for us and for your time and taking a break from your break. Going back to vacation.
I'm going back to vacation, yeah.
You might want to practice vacation at some point. So I want to thank you again for your time and being flexible and rescheduling this so that we can get your full presentation. And I don't want to rush you off the call. So if there are any questions out there, the chat box is open. And I am assuming that I can share your PowerPoint with our group.
Yes, you can send out the PowerPoint. And if anybody has any questions, Melissa, they can funnel them through you, and then you can use that as a conduit. That's fine with me. I'm happy to support.
So it's like when people are thinking about what they heard and they come up with some questions, feel free to email me and we can answer that way. Getting some thank yous in the talk, great call, and so thank you to you from our group. I will probably see you at something soon.
Yeah, or we can just plan to kind of meet. We're not that far. Meet in the middle.
That would be great.
I'm thinking at the beach.
That's a great plan. Until we do.
Yep.
Everybody have a great afternoon.
Yeah, have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.